everybody. Welcome to a Mexican Crossing Lines. We're streaming on Duke 1517 on YouTube and 88.1 Fargo Moorhead on Facebook and a Mexican Crossing Lines on Twitch. We're also airing on 88.1 KPPP LP Radio Fargo Moorhead.
That's right, folks. You can find us on all our social media platforms, including Instagram, Gomez-Schempp. And you can also find us on Twitter at media_PPP. You can email me at cindy@kppfm.com, Duke at kppfm.com, or you can call and leave us a message at 566-0917. It's our message call-in line. Leave a message for about 3 minutes. We might put you on the air. Welcome, everyone, to a Mexican Crossing Lines with your host, Cindy Gomez-Schempp.
And Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM. KPPPLP Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. And today we are going to tell you about a tragedy averted, a sinkhole in downtown Fargo, which is going to cost millions to repair that you haven't even heard about in the news. How is it possible that things like this just kind of slip through the cracks in the media reporting? This probably happens all around the country all the time, Duke, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. There's been quite a few in Fargo. You know, they just come unexpectedly, and things just start to sink, and you go down, 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 down,
Duke.
down.
But, I mean, it's not just this news of the sinkhole. It's like the media tells us one story in the mainstream media, and we get a different, usually more detailed story at the local level, although not always. And then days later, weeks later, months later, even years later, we finally start to get the real picture.
That's right. In fact, I haven't heard anything about this sinkhole in Fargo in the news. You know, I looked it up. In fact, the picture behind you is the area where it's at. If you look behind you, behind the food trucks along the railroad tracks, that's where the sinkhole was discovered, and we'll have our guest person to tell us all about it.
This is a very important part of downtown Fargo.
Yeah.
It's where all of the new renovations are being made, where all the new buildings are being built, and you'll see some of those in our reporting of our show today. But there's a lot of development that's happening. And for there to have been a sinkhole, which is going to, that is big enough that it's going to cost the property owners and leasers of this area to spend $1 to $3 million. It's
exactly
a big project.
Very serious.
But I also think it's very interesting in terms of the way that media has changed. We've looked at old newspapers, and we do a lot of media training talking about how media has changed and how important it is to understand what that means for your local news, because people that used to read print media in the 60s and the 70s will recall the detail. The amount of reporters they had for everything and the detail they went into. Like, they would even report about kids' birthday parties and who came and what they wore and what flavor was the cake.
That's right. Like, who visited and where they were from.
Right? Like, there's articles out there you can find that have these kinds of details. We don't have that anymore.
No.
With the consolidation and the shrinking of the media, I mean, part of the reason why you don't have all of the details and you don't have all of that information right away is because we have shrinking newsrooms. We have a shrinking number of reporters. And as I learned through my time working in media and as an editor of a newspaper, the playing field has changed. Reporters just aren't going out there, and they don't have the same commitment to getting the information. They don't have the same kind of pushback on law enforcement and government and any other agencies. It's really become difficult on another level. And what I mean by another level, I'm talking about difficult to get the information whether it's from government officials, the state's attorney, whether it's from police, whether it's from school officials, whoever it's from, you really almost have to sue them at this point in our landscape, whereas that wasn't the case before. When I was growing up, police would talk to the media about what had just happened.
Yeah.
People in the community, including mayors and other leaders, would weigh in on how they felt about the latest tragedy, whether it was a flood or a kidnapping. But now,
Yep.
their lips are sealed.
Exactly.
They do not say a word. Everything is pending investigation, couldn't be reached for comment. And of course, since we have less reporters doing the work out there, with less of that, I don't know what you call it, cojones, intestinal fortitude to confront power and say, that's not the answer, or you're lying, because it's also become a lot more common to make things up as we go or have alternative facts, as Kellyanne Conway coined. And so, especially with everything that's been happening with the investigation now of this mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, which we recently reported on, more information is going to continue to come out. And the solutions that have been proposed for what should be done, what can be done to keep our kids safer in schools, well, you guys know how I feel about it. I told you personally, as a Latina, as a Mexican American raised in the American school system, that, you know, doesn't have any Latino friends or relatives that weren't abused, discriminated against, or mistreated in the school system. I have a perspective that may not be as popular, but it's very consistent with what I think a lot of parents of color are feeling right now and have been feeling this entire time about the institution that discriminates our children and puts them on a pipeline from the school to the prison, which is, we need to vote. But what was really astonishing to me, Duke, is I was watching more footage after our reporting on this, and I was watching the aftermath of what happened. I guess there must have been a place where they were taking the students, and parents were going to be reunited with students at this location. So they were all huddling around this building, waiting for the kids to be bused there, to find out, to see their children. And what was shocking to me was that when the kids were coming off the bus, they weren't allowed to go over to their families.
Yeah.
They weren't allowed to reunite with their families. Imagine going through something that traumatic where you're just dying to see your child and make sure they're okay and hug them. And you can see this little girl runs by her family and they tell her, we're here, go ahead, go inside the school, do what you're supposed to do. And she runs over to her mom and breaks down crying because she's been traumatized.
Exactly.
And parents, even in the midst of this, I already told you how horrific it was, that law enforcement tased, arrested, threatened, and physically assaulted parents to stop them from saving their own children's lives. The cops were not there to serve and protect or to defend the children from the gunmen. They were there to threaten, oppress, and point guns and tasers and put handcuffs on the parents, the screaming, distraught parents waiting for their children, trying to save their children's lives. And even in the aftermath, the trauma continued. They're not allowed to get in touch with their kids. They're not allowed to hold them. They're not allowed to comfort them until they get signed out from the school.
Wow. It sounds just like a prison. They turn this school into prison. You know, usually they wait till they're out of school and put them in prison, but they have them in prison now.
I understand you have to have some kind of checks and balances. Kids can't just be coming and going from the school. Or can they?
Yeah, or who's running the schools? I mean, are the cops running the schools now? You know, are the cops now dominion over the schools? I mean, is that what it's turned into?
Well, lawmakers and authorities, including cops, which are now almost in every single school. I mean, we just learned that the Uvalde, Texas school district, the Robb Elementary School, they had their own police force,
Yeah.
separate from the city police, separate from the sheriff's office, separate from all of those. So it's here. Is it here to stay? I guess that depends on the parents. I guess it
Yeah.
depends on American citizens. But I will tell you what the repercussions of all of this are, because we heard a lot about hardening the schools. I don't know what that means. It just means more prison-like to me. It sounds more prison-like to me. But in Buffalo, New York, where just 2 days prior to the Uvalde shooting, there was a massacre at the Tops grocery store, mostly in a black neighborhood. All of the schools are not allowing any visitors. They're beginning this hardening of the schools, which means a hardening against everyone. Nobody can show up and pick up their child. Nobody can come into the school unannounced. You got to make an appointment. You got to call the school ahead of time. And that's the only way that you can get permission to collect your own children. How do we feel about that?
Yeah.
Is that something we want going forward?
No, in fact, what people can do about it, most of the school board elections a lot of them are during the primaries. So there's upcoming school board elections all over the country. And that's an opportunity to really get good representation and have issues heard about the schools, because the school boards are supposed to govern the schools, not the cops.
We have power at the local level to put pressure on our mayors, on our city commissioners, on our city councils, on our school boards, and on our local elected representative in the mayor's office, and even in the state's attorney's office, right?
Yep.
The prosecutor's office. We have power as citizens to talk to our neighbors in our community and say what we want for our kids, our schools, and our town. And with that, I will segue into today's program on the newly found and now being fixed sinkhole in the center of downtown Fargo. Full disclosure, the subject of my interview today is none other than my very own brother and the proprietor of the Taco Bros food truck in downtown Fargo, Octavio Gomez. And so, without any further ado, let's take it to Octavio, and please tell us, how did this whole thing with the sinkhole unfold?
All right, so last year I was setting up for my food truck, and I was adding the water to my tanks, and I just kind of got distracted by some visitors. It was going to be like right around our opening day, and pretty soon they were like, "It's time to open." And so I went and started opening up my food truck, and I got through like the rush hour, probably an hour and a half to 2 hours later. I remembered that I never shut off the water. And so at that juncture, I was like, oh my goodness, what kind of a flood have I caused? You know, this kind of amount of water could have filled up like 5 kiddie pools. And so I go outside and I look around my food truck, and there wasn't that much of a puddle. And I kind of look off to one side, and the water seems to be going into this little golf ball sized little hole. And on the other side of that golf ball sized little hole, maybe like, you know, the length of one of the concrete slabs, was the slit where it meets with the other concrete slab. And there, the other part of the water was going down that side. And this made me a little curious. And so I headed all the way down to Broadway to get around the fence that my truck is against over here at Great Northern Cycle. And I look into this hole, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to see a bit of water. I saw nothing. And then I went to the other where the slab met, and I saw nothing there either. And so the next day, I kind of go over there during the midday sun so I can see if there's a better casting of light to see in the hole. And I could see down the golf ball size hole that, there was dirt, and it was about 5 feet deep. And then I went to the slabs where they met, and that section, I could not see anything down there. Now, granted, it was a little thinner, so I decided I'd drop something in there to see if I could hear it plop. And I heard nothing.
Oh my God! Like a bottomless pit.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was bottomless. I didn't hear a plop, and I thought maybe I'll hear a plop from the water that went in there the day before. So at that juncture, I was like, all right, well, this is kind of fairly odd. And then as my clientele came through, they kept on asking, like, how do you like the new space? And how's everything going? Do you love it? And I was like, do you love it? Look at this. You got a grassy knoll now. You have trees. You have park benches. You have like multiple garbage cans. I said, this is just gorgeous. I was like, oh, that's great that you're loving it. No problems? And I was like, well, there is this sinkhole behind the truck. Like a sinkhole. And I was like, and I walked him over to the side. And I see that little golf ball size hole over there? It's about 5 feet deep. And the weeks went by, and I kept on paying attention to my sinkhole. And one day, it just got a little bit bigger. And now, you could probably fit, a lady size.
Could you get your foot stuck in there?
I probably wouldn't have been able to get my foot through without trying to pound on it and make it bigger. But, a women's size 6 or 5
child
would have probably done it. A child for sure.
So it's a danger.
Yeah. Well, sure.
It's a hazard.
Sure. It was definitely a danger. And at that juncture, I was, talking about it even more and more. I was like, yeah, but my sinkhole's getting bigger. And folks were like, well, what are you going to do about it? I was like, that's a good point. What am I going to do about it? And this other fellow said, just call BNSF. They'll take care of it. And so I was like, all right, I know what their number is. They have it up on signs over here. And so I called BNSF, and I talked to some facility manager's guy. And he told me that he looked it up, and that property is owned by Amtrak. And so I said, Amtrak, huh? Like, you got their number? And he's like, it's just just call the Amtrak line. It'll give you some prompts, and it'll finally lead you to who you need to talk to. He's like, I don't have it here. And so I called Amtrak. Probably a day later, I didn't have too much time to play up waiting on hold. I only had like a 3-hour break. And then when I got a hold of Amtrak, they told me, yeah, no, that's BNSF's issue. We lease the land. They're like the landlord. You don't fix your own sink. You just call the landlord. I was like, I'm getting played with. I got the ping pong going on here.
So
they're just tossing me back and forth.
So but you were concerned about the safety of this area. It looks like we might be losing your connection there. But I just wanted to ask you. You were worried for the safety, not just of the patrons of your food truck. There are other food trucks there, right? Can you kind of show us exactly where?
When you start thinking about a sinkhole, you don't really know the extent of where it goes, and it's a railroad track directly next to this thing. And if it were to be a sinkhole that was going to affect the railroad track, then a train could fall into the sinkhole.
Oh my God.
And if that train falls into a sinkhole, it could be coming from the Bakken and have multiple tanks of gas. And we already had multiple tanks of gas, combined with all the food trucks in this court, we had over 300 gallons of propane. There was a guy that had one 300-gallon tank. I have 3 100-gallon tanks, and another food truck has 2 50s. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it's plenty of propane. And so that part of it was, not necessarily keeping me out up at night, but it kind of freaked me out. Exactly how problematic is this thing? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm going to keep on thinking about my problem, and when people ask me things, I'm going to ask them things. And a guy comes and he's wearing his orange vest and clearly works for the railroad company. Mm-hmm. I was like telling him about this issue, and he's like, well, how is that? You know, they keep it clean for the Amtrak. He's like, and that could be a problem, you know, because he's driving over it with a Bobcat, you know, style vehicle. And if there's a hole over there that could suck in a Bobcat, that's no good. He's like, what you got to do is you got to talk to the train master. And that tickled my senses right there. I was like, the train master. You know, something out of the Matrix. I was like, I only have to meet this guy or talk to him at the very least. Or, you know, it could have been something like, you know, the Ghostbusters. Are you the key master? Yes, I am the gatekeeper. And so I called and I asked for the train master, and I talked to the train master, and I said the words that he told me to say. He's like, you tell him that it's an imminent danger to employees and that it's an imminent danger to the people that are boarding and exiting the Amtrak. And I was like, it's an imminent danger to me too. I'm right across from that sinkhole.
It's an imminent danger to downtown Fargo.
But as long as there was people going to be injuring themselves on BNSF land, they were going to take a look at it. And like 3 days passed, and now this sinkhole, you know, it's good enough to take anyone's foot, you know.
How
it's
big?
About,
do you know how big the sinkhole is now that they've come to try to fix it?
What's that?
Do you know how big the dimensions of the sinkhole are now?
Oh, that sinkhole is gone. They've been tearing this area up for some time now.
Do you have any idea how big it was?
At the time being, it was probably enough to like take somebody with a size 11 shoe out. Okay. They would have stepped in that, and it wasn't like circle shaped. It was foot shaped.
Okay.
It kind of looked like somebody was wearing some Crocs or something that were size 11.
So
it was nice and big.
That sounds pretty small. It's just enough for a foot to fit in.
Enough for a foot to fit in, yeah. And then I never went over there and started pushing on it, and it was already falling in by itself. So I wasn't about to go start dabbling in the idea of like, well, like see just how loose, you know, this asphalt is surrounding this sinkhole, because I didn't want to go there.
So how long is the area
like 3 days
that
later,
they're fixing?
So Broadway is the commencement of this project, and it's going all the way to 6th Street.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And they started tearing it out, and I've been like, just, you know, here as they've been starting the whole process. They hadn't even started excavating or anything along those lines, and they've got all the rebar laid out, and it's green, you know, which is kind of an uncommon color to see rebar in. And I didn't really think too much of it, but I had a customer that came by, and he's like, what's going on back here? And I was like, they're fixing my sinkhole. He's like, what sinkhole? I was like, I told him my story. He's like, well, that rebar has to be sent to St. Paul, and then they dip it in epoxy resin, and it's expensive. It's the best kind of rebar Bunny can buy, and it lasts forever. It doesn't rust, and when you do demolition, it pops right out of the concrete. It's the easiest stuff to take out. I was like, whoa. And he's like, yeah, about 3 times more expensive than just buying rebar. I was like, whoa, they're serious about this thing. And then as I'm talking to another guy from the railroad company, I was like, so you guys went and had that rebar sent to St. Paul to get it dipped in epoxy resin? He's like, top of the line. And I was like, wow, how much is this thing going to cost you guys? And he's like, well, estimates are about $1.6 to $3 million. I was
Woo!
like, what? Wow. And he's like, yep, just for a sidewalk. I was like, can you imagine how many homes you could have bought if you just decided to put houses there?
But
And so, yeah, I mean, they're digging, they're putting it all in, and they're fixing it all, and it looks like they're going to be at it until maybe the end of November or so. They're cruising right along. They've got one slab of concrete in, and on one side of that slab of concrete, the concrete is 16 inches. And then they say that's just like where it meets the other end, and the rest of it's going to be 6 inches.
can you show us any of the
just
area
kind
of work?
to see how things are going. Sure. I mean, like, I'll show you where the sinkhole was. And that's where the little guy, you know, like, if you look there, it doesn't look like there's a sinkhole anymore. They've excavated it, and it's just the little guy was right about there. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can see, you know, like right here, this is Pickabob, and there's Terry, and he's got griddles. You know, there wouldn't have been too much explosion going on there, maybe some charcoal dust going on, but then you get over here, and right behind the sinkhole, then you've got the food truck, and my food truck was square dab in the middle of where the two slabs meet. You
Okay.
can see where they meet here.
Yep.
And then as you go over here, it would have been the same mirror image right over there. And that sinkhole is the one that had no plop. A plopless sinkhole.
No plop.
But
That's scary.
no plop. And no plop sinkhole. And then this is the Dominican Republic. They got Mi Barrio, and they've got 250-gallon propane tanks. And they're, you know, we're just directly in that same area. You can kind of see where it all kind of goes. And it goes all the way. And then you see the rebar is that stuff over there.
Sure.
And that stuff is the epoxy resin.
The green
rebar. And everything's already pre-cut and pre-welded. And they get it all dipped in that form. And it just goes all the way. You can see the Amtrak kind of at the end of the Northern Cycle building.
Mm-hmm.
And behind the Northern Cycle is where it ends. And that's, I believe, 6th. So, yeah.
Wow, they spared no expense.
They just built like brand new.
Wow.
Yeah, and they just built these apartments. They're not even fully complete. And then you have the new building behind the Bison over here that was just built. I'm guessing, you know, a nice Bakken full of precious oil from the Bakken. Could have probably scorched all this area. The Ford building. Maybe if they just blew up the water tower, it would have put out a good source of the fires. I don't know. If I was thinking like a superhero, that's where I would have gone. Blow up the water tower. Or Superman, just tip it over. And then Cowboy Jacks, they opened like 2 years ago in September. So that would have been interesting. And that water tower there does not contain any liquids. So it would have helped nothing.
Well,
but
it sounds like
been the plot in the superhero movie.
It sounds like a tragedy was averted for sure. And you kind of helped stop a possible disaster from happening in downtown Fargo.
I was curious as to meeting the train master is about as far as I'm going to take it.
Okay. Well, now that you've met the train master.
Once I heard the train master was involved, it just triggered my Matrix love for the train master, and I just had to. And
it sounds like you got some people down there that are now working to fix that whole area, and they're it's nice to know that they're not going to cut any corners on fixing it.
Well, if somebody was just able to chuck money at something and make sure that it was done correctly and with no concerns for the next 100 years, I don't know. I mean, like, The Minnesota bridges, they're always getting inspected, and these guys are always going down the train tracks, and they're using like special gear that will even check for fractures and anything along the railroad tracks. I mean, they're very adamant about having a safe environment, and all you have to do is tell the train master, imminent danger for your employees, imminent danger for your clientele and surrounding neighbors, and then they're on it like key masters and gatekeepers
Immediately, apparently.
Yeah, if that was that simple, like they hacked the code in Ghostbusters, and he said, yes, I'm the key master, and then they got to go beat up Ghost of the Gozerian. So that sinkhole could have been Ghost of the Gozerian, and it could have just consumed all of Fargo. But we got him.
Well, thank you very much for your service. You can find Octavio Gomez at the Taco Bros food truck located by the Great Northern Cycle in downtown Fargo. Thanks for showing us around and sharing the story, Octavio.
You bet. There's our neighbors, Pick-a-Bob. There's Taco Bros. There's Mi Barrio, Dominican cuisine. Got a variety of different flavors you can come try out. And enjoy the idea that you will not get sucked into a sinkhole.
Amazing.
You just get to enjoy the grassy knoll that we have here now at the park.
Good food, a grassy
Fantastic.
knoll,
Well,
and
good
complete
talking to you,
safety.
Yeah, this is all just now a little park and maintained by the city, so it's really nice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story, and we'll see you soon at Taco Bros. Wow, that was an amazing story. It's kind of hard to believe that a threat to our community of that magnitude was just sitting there without anyone noticing it for so long. I mean, he's known about the sinkhole since last year. Can you imagine?
Yeah, and we forgot to ask him how deep it was. He's talking about the size of it and everything, but
the size of the hole itself.
Yeah, every one I've looked at, a sinkhole is usually very deep. So it was very dangerous.
Well, when we first talked about it on the phone, he told me something about there was 16 feet wide where they were working and putting in the rebar. So I can only imagine how deep it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But anybody that's going in the downtown Fargo area, you can see the site of the construction and the rebar and where they're working. It's not a small area.
No.
It's taking up quite a bit of space. So congratulations to Octavio for uncovering this potentially very dangerous situation for everyone in the downtown Fargo Moorhead area. And I just want to talk a little bit as I close out our show about how what happens in our local community has reverberations throughout the whole country, and how things that happen outside of our community have reverberations on us. And I want to send condolences and prayers to all of the people in the Fargo-Moorhead region that have friends and family in Uvalde, Texas, because I know many of you do. And if you have any stories or any persons in Uvalde who want to share their stories with our local radio station here at 88.1 FM, please definitely contact us at the contact information we gave at the top of the show. And of course, you can always call in at our call-in number 701-566-0917. Thank you very much for being with us today on A Mexican Crossing Lines with your hosts, Cindy Gomez-Schempp
and Duke Gomez-Schempp.
You're listening to 88.1 FM, KPPPLP, Fargo Moorhead, where we are adding local color to your airwaves. God bless and good evening.